Welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name is Joe Augustin. I got in the middle this time around.
Yeah, my name's Tim Wade. I'm at the end, which means I need to say something about the show. But I won't say a lot because a lot of you have been following us for quite a while. We are the No Show, where we cover the news that matters to keep you informed so that this weekend you can have a fantastic conversation at whatever dinner party table you end up with, informed with what's been going on across the media, not just the media that is served to you usually, but across a wide gamut of opinion, which gives you a broader depth and insights into issues that matter. So we're going to talk about that today. We also have a special guest. Are we going to do our 10 minutes first or do our guest first? What do you think?
Guest first.
All right, let's introduce our guest. His name is Eugene Seah, and he meets lots of organizations in different parts of the world. He is the Say Yes to Abundance guy, which really just tells you a little bit about his mindset, about how he feels that there is something for all of us if we just see the opportunities and reach into them. He has got his fingers in lots of pies. He's a serial entrepreneur where he has a lot of people, he makes friends with you. You got to be careful. When he makes friends with you, then you end up buying insurance from him. You end up going to amazing events. This is what's happened to me. And then you end up, sharing the stage with him as he's presenting amazing stuff to corporates and thought leaders. So he's this multi-talented fellow. We're very pleased to have him on the show. Welcome, Eugene.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I noticed that there's a piece of news, and recently there's a pattern. I noticed there's a pattern across Singapore news. I'm based in Singapore, by the way, in case all of you are wondering. And you can see HDB flat behind me, just to show that it's Singapore. Yeah, and recently there's this disbarred lawyer called Samuel Xiao. He went viral for the wrong reasons because he started physically abusing his colleague, who is a young woman, secretary. Yeah, and this case has been going on. And I noticed that in recent years, a lot of Singaporeans, I can only comment on Singaporeans, I don't want to talk about people that I'm not related to, they start to be very verbally and physically abusive to their colleagues, even to strangers. And Singapore for some time we had to wear face masks, and even you have all these people in red shirts saying that, hey, please sir, gentle reminder, please wear face masks. And these people were being abused as well. Right? They were saying like, mind your own business, or I'm sovereign, you cannot touch me, or like I have my own rights as a Singapore citizen. Okay, so my obviously I can't really conclude to say like, oh, this is because of I'm not God or an angel or anything. But my observation is, I believe that a lot of people are very stressed, very stressed in Singapore. And in fact, the Ministry of Health and the Institute of Mental Health have been releasing a lot of statistics in recent months that mental health has gone down in Singapore. There's a lot of people who are burnt out. They are starting to see both psychologists and psychiatrists. And being a life coach, a certified life coach, I've been seeing a lot of people who tell me they are burnt out. They're wondering whether they should throw the letter and quit a perfectly good job, because they said they are overworked. They said their bosses are toxic. So all these things are somewhat like unrelated because it's in companies, there's lawyer, there is a stranger.
I think we need to address the crackle.
Yeah. So two things. One thing is I've never heard a response to a lovely introduction quite like that one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And secondly,
just introduce myself. Is it?
Sorry. Secondly, there's a weird crackling as you talk now. Now you almost sound like you're possibly moving over to the dark side. There's a crackling in your microphone. It's only when you speak that we're getting that crackle. But it's an interesting topic that you're talking about. But I think before we go into that, because mental health is a big issue, and one of the things about mental health is this feeling of uncertainty, and part of a feeling of uncertainty is not really knowing what's going on and having an appreciation of it. One of the things about the No Show is to be able to give people a little bit more idea about what's going on in a broader sense of the place, and at the same time give them information to make an informed decision. It may create some uncertainty in some areas, but at least you're getting multiple perspectives. And one of the things we do at the beginning of the No Show is this quick fire 10 minutes or so, or the top 10 articles it's catched or caught. That's a new word. Caught nice. Andrea's North. Caught Andrea's attention.
The correct pronunciation is catched.
Catched, yes. Catched in the right A. Eugene, did you want to finish the point with, and then we'll go over to Andrea for her top 10?
Yeah. So I just want to say, whoever is watching this, number one, potentially you are the one abusing your colleagues. Please stop it.
Viewership's just gone down to 3,000. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and if you are not the one, if you are the one being abused, someone is shouting things at you, like prodding you on the forehead, please report it. It's not acceptable. And please speak to any of us. We are always happy to talk to you about your life.
Okay, I'm going to just jump in here and suggest something, Eugene. Maybe what we can do is in this next few moments, if you'll disconnect from this and then reconnect, and then we'll see how the sound turns out when you do this.
If you got some headphones, that might help.
Oh yeah, I don't have headphones.
That might also help. It's okay.
Let me leave and come back.
Yeah, no, basically just your phone has just gone out of sync with us. That's all. But let's get back to the format of the show. Make sure that we're on track. And for those of you who are watching or listening for the first time, what Tim did just now is it's a classic move in the speaking world where we try to bring everything back on track. So here we are, back on track right now. So let's talk about the news.
All right, so the Fast 10. So the Just Stop Oil, hashtag Just Stop Oil. Check them out if you haven't already. If you don't know about Just Stop Oil, I don't know what you're doing. But anyway, they're in action and getting a lot of criticism for what they're doing. But what they're reacting to is absolute sheer terror for their future. And it's because of all the crazy extreme weather events that are going on around the world, which we're going to talk about later. So just to give you a flavor for some of the things that are going on in the world you may not have heard of, including the one I've just gone through in Phuket, where it was a massive flooding event. But in Nigeria, 600 people are dead, 2 million people have been affected by the worst flooding in more than a decade, and more than 200,000 homes have been completely or partially damaged. In Mexico, at least 3 people have died after a powerful hurricane that caused heavy rains, flash flooding, and landslides in western Mexico. We have a state of emergency after floodwaters have swamped entire neighborhoods in Chad's capital city. 1/4 of the city is underwater, and more than 50,000 people have been forced from their homes. Mount Kilimanjaro is on fire. 768 million people in the world are currently underfed. It's nearly 1/7 of the world's population. And after the recent floods in Australia, which I was also in the middle of, they're expecting millions in crop losses in New South Wales because of the floods. And this will add to the risk of food shortages, price hikes, and of course, a global famine, which is predicted to really escalate within the next 3 years. And yet people are up in arms over people throwing soup onto plexiglass, which was protecting a Van Gogh painting. The good news is that no one seemed to mind when they painted Tufton Street, which is 55 Tufton Street, which is in London. And this is where the right-wing think tanks working out our future. You can think of them as Liz Truss's mates. All right. Moving on, Kanye West, otherwise known as Ye, is out. Persona non grata. Have you guys must have heard that this week, right? Tim, you look like you were surprised. Yes.
Anything he does doesn't really surprise me. It's surprising he's been held in such high esteem all this time, but okay.
You are, exactly. No one wants him anymore. Even Skechers escorted him out of the building. His school's closed down. He is no longer a billionaire. And this is all, of course, following his terrible anti-Semitic comments. And the way that this has been addressed and responded to is absolutely appropriate, because we know where that can go. Even his wax statue in Madame Tussauds has been removed. So all I could think was, surely it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Tim?
Well, yes. Tell us a little bit more about his... can you mention a little bit more about him being escorted out of Skechers? What was the deal with that?
He turned up unannounced because they were obviously a former sponsor. Adidas is the big one, the big announcement this week. But he turned up unannounced and they escorted him out of the building. So, yeah.
Well, more people have been escorted out of buildings. Let me just go into China news very, very quickly. So we saw China's 5-yearly Communist Party Congress wrap up last weekend. President Xi Jinping's core position in the country's leadership and an unusual third term in power has been secured. There's a great piece in the BBC worth a read titled Xi Jinping's Party is Just Getting Started. It kind of tracks the history of him and his rise, and also what's been going on almost since Chairman Mao's time through to now, and some sort of directional changes. There is, I must say though, when I read it, I don't know about you, Andrea, but when I read that one, I could read it with two different lenses, which is a really interesting idea. One lens was, there was a bit of history and historical stuff, but there was a lens, there was a wording and a framing of it that it could have been written in another way that was a lot more celebratory. So we got to perhaps keep those things in mind sometimes when we're reading these sorts of articles, as to where they're coming from and what's the agenda behind that particular article. But at the same time, there was a lot of moments that we've heard about over the years from China, where the brutal crackdowns on stuff. But there was a piece there that was talking about corruption was getting out of control at one point, and for a leader to come in and stamp that out, and thousands of people are thrown in jail and or removed from positions of authority, to bring it back on track to a sort of a more, the idea of a more squeaky clean leadership group. You would say in any country, if you didn't just mention the word China, but the leaders come in, worked on stamping out corruption, removed people that seem to be involved to try and create and course correct the country's the direction, you would have to say that would have been a good thing. To take control of corruption once and for all in a powerful way. And then if there's party leadership infighting based on trying to regain power from the purpose of pocketing stuff, then that for yourself or your party, then that would also suggest, let's remove that opposition in one sense. And we've seen evidences of success of that in small island nations that seem to be very well run. And so again, it's like, what's the correct approach and what's the thing? But it's a really interesting read as well. Speaking of, so you were talking about Kanye West being so you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in Time, there's another magazine, another article which talks about China's green future and how they're basically going to rebuild back from the COVID times with complete green revolution and basically dominate the world. And I thought that was a really, really fascinating insight. So I know a lot of the Western media rhetoric is anti-China.
Yep.
But if we're not open to listening to what China is actually doing, I think we're missing a really big and important part of the story that's going on in the world right now.
I have to agree with you. Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, we gotta balance it a little bit, the way that we're looking at it. But if we're all looking at the debacle that's happening in the UK, the mess in the USA, the madmen running Australia, and and these sorts of organizations, these sorts of challenges everywhere, then who's doing it right? And who's going, well, maybe we shouldn't have the same system as them if that's where it's going to ultimately end up. Maybe we need to look at something else. So I don't want to go and, I mean, all I'm doing is standing back as a powerless observer is how I kind of see it. I'm not making any, you should do this or you should do that comment at all. I'm just saying it's interesting to observe. And I come from a psychology background and people observation, all that sort of stuff. So, okay, so anyway, that's a great piece worth a read, just with different lenses on as well. You were talking about Kanye West being escorted out of Skechers. Well, we had Hu Jintao, the ex-president of China, being escorted out of a China Party Congress. And when you read that, you think, oh my goodness, now it's sort of a coup against the older leadership and the older regime. But when you actually read the article as well, nobody knows why he was escorted out. It wasn't a tussly sort of escorted out. He seemed to be sort of nodding and saying something to President Xi, and as a result, he gets up and heads off with some assistance, and maybe that assistance, because he's a elderly gentleman in his late 70s, was to stop him falling over because he wasn't feeling well. That was the thing that was coming out. So nobody knows what happened, but when you read the headline, you go, oh dear, this is a thing, and it may be a thing. It may be, so we don't know. But he was placed sitting next to the current premier, and as a result, he wouldn't have been placed there if he wasn't of import and significance. Yeah. So unless that was a visual thing to say he's out and there's only one person left, anyway. Musk buying Twitter again. So maybe say you're buying Twitter, the price goes up. Say, no, I don't think so. The price tanks, and then buy it at the lower price. Maybe that's a good idea.
No. Anyway, he had to honor the original price.
Well, he did? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So he was going to get stuck in court for a while, and he thought it's probably cheaper just to buy it. Anyway, so a few shenanigans going on, from arriving to Twitter's HQ with a sink to threatening to lay off 75% of staff, which some commentators have said probably delighted the bankers giving him some money. But at the same time, if bankers are involved at all. But yeah, apparently Facebook and Google are lapping those employees up. So have a look at that TechCrunch article. In Australia, we saw so we turned from Twitter to diamonds, from Musk's money to diamonds in Australia. But this is a netball team called the Diamonds, who have pushed back on a mining magnate, Gina Reinhardt, and she'd committed $15 million lifeline to the Diamonds. They were $7 million in debt. These numbers seem very small when you just have talked about Elon Musk buying Twitter, mind you. But they should just write a letter to him going, "Can you help us out, mate?" And he'd probably go, "Yeah, here you go. Here's some loose change from a pocket." But anyway, the reason for their pushback: her father this is a fairly, really, just a horrible situation, really. They were pushing back because some of their world champion players are of indigenous origin, and the sponsor's father, Lang Hancock, who was the founder of Hancock Prospecting and Gina's father, suggested a plan at one point that would kill off troublesome indigenous people in Australia when they weren't assimilating correctly with with society. They were trying to hold on to their own culture and rejecting Australian society way back at that time. So many have strong opinions. Well, when I say way back at that time, it was only a few decades ago. Yeah. And many have strong opinions that the team shouldn't have pushed back in that way. They didn't want to wear the logo because he had said, this is what he said: those that have been assimilated into society and are earning a good living and earning wages amongst the civilized areas, that have been accepted into society and accept society and can handle a society, I'd leave them well alone, he said. The ones who are no good to themselves and can't accept things, the half-castes, and this is where most of the trouble comes, he said, I would dope the water up so that they were sterile and would breed themselves out in the future, and that would solve the problem. So the Diamonds have asked Gina. So all that happened then is that's old news that he said that. What the Diamonds asked, though, is that Gina distance herself from those comments, and she didn't. She didn't say, I disagree with those comments, or I wish he hadn't said those comments, or he said those comments and I can't do anything about it. She didn't distance herself from it, and as a result, there's been this, we don't want to wear that, we want to reject this. This is dirty money to us. Yeah. And
there was another story in Perth this week, a young boy called Cassius, about 15, I think, who was beaten to death at one of the train stations somewhere around Perth, Western Australia. I haven't seen all the full details, but that's created a real spark, because the way Aboriginals are treated in Australia continues to be appalling, and we need to remember that. But the people who were criticising the Diamonds for taking this stance, that's the thing I found really interesting. Like that what they have no right to sort of have a moral sort of stance. I found that really, really fascinating. It's an interesting story to have a look at.
Yeah, and it is interesting because you've seen a lot of taking the knee over in America, and then all of this is sort of going very much global. And what's really nice is that people feel they have a voice now. That's nice. And what's not nice is a lot of people are voicing their opinion when they should probably shut up. And that is this is just the vitriol coming online about, that attacks people for saying these things. So it's a very brave thing to say, because you're basically jeopardizing yourself and your whole team and the sport in a sense. But it's about values actually in the end, and it's about being true to and having an integrity of self. The thing is, Gina Reinhardt could, from an integrity of self perspective, argue exactly the same point. I'm entitled to have my opinion and everything else as well. So, but the problem is, I don't think anyone would agree with what her dad said, and it just seems a convoluted mess. So there's a positive that people are feeling the freedom to be able to speak up and be heard, and I guess that's the positive to take out of it at this point. It's an interesting one to see what happens.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to get stuck into what's going on in the financial markets? It's a lot of fun.
Well, I'm going to try and do it in this very short time that we're supposed to do it in. And this is, a lot of it is based on this article in the Wall Street Journal about the trouble that the world is facing right now. Now, for those of you who are participating in the market, looking at the market like today, this past week, you're going to go like, I don't understand what people mean by there's bad news in the market. It looks like a fantastic week. It's been going up and up and up. The market's going up. What can they be that's wrong with the market right now? It's a very convoluted story. All of it's connected together. Liz Truss has a role to play in this big story as well. And it is about how the world's financial markets are really all tied together. And I was thinking about how to help everyone understand what's going on. Okay, let's just imagine the world as what you see on the screen right now. So there's Andrea, myself, and then there's Eugene, and then there's Tim. The world actually runs on debt. There is less actual money than there is money in the world. Now that sounds like a very confusing sort of thing, but basically Andrea can lend me $10. I can have these $10 borrowed from Andrea, and I can loan out $9 to Eugene. And Eugene can decide that he wants to rent to give out $8 and something cents of $8 and just slightly less than $9 to Tim. And that's what the financial market has kind of agreed amongst itself. It's kind of a debt, a lending. It's a lending ratio that we're all allowed to have. We can lend out this amount of the money that comes in there. So that creates a multiplier in the world, and it creates money as well. Now, the second thing that comes along with that is, of course, then where does all this come from? Where do I get this initial money to sort of lend to everybody else? Well, you can do that by sort of having the government issue debt as well. And so a lot of companies actually get debt, and they buy debt that is from the government. And if you think about the government, we talk about the government in terms of the U.S. government. The debt is secure, because if I borrow $1 million from the U.S. government, I am going to get I'm going to get that $1 million back, because they not only I guess have control of it, they literally print the money. So in terms of a secured debt and solely in U.S. dollars, that seems like a really good idea. But when you think about the thing itself that is being owed, U.S. dollars, being used in a different way to try and create other things, and they've done so much printing of it right now, is that the U.S. dollar itself has become less valuable, and therefore has become a little less stable. So if you imagine this whole relationship right now, so Andrea's lent me money, and I've lent Eugene money, and Tim's borrowed money from Eugene. Everybody in this kind of relationship right now is owed the money, but the money itself may be declining in value as well. So now there's a kind of strain on all the relationships that we have, because you owe me $10, you'll give me $10, but by the time I get $10, it's not going to be really worth $10, and that's kind of a bit of a stress. And then there's the interest rate as well that goes along with that. Now, to try and control the inflation in the world, one of the big things that they do is they try and change the the rate of interest, right? And that changes this relationship between all of us as well. So how much interest will I pay on the debt? Now, all this is going to influence the rest of the world as well, because to buy stocks, to invest in businesses, to create new things, I generally need to borrow money. I'm going to get it from somewhere, and I'm going to get it at a certain price, the interest rate. And if the interest rates are going up, it's putting pressure on that. So there is going to be a kind of downward pressure. The higher the interest rate, the downward pressure is going to stop us from growing our economy. The problem right now is the world is going in a way where inflation is going so high that the big tool that they have, the big break that they have, which is interest rates, is being brought up at a rate that's never been done before. It's really, really going up very fast. And this is also affecting these relationships that we all have here about who owes money to who, to what, and all that. And that's making a very tenuous situation. Now, that is the background of what's happening. And if you try to imagine the world starting today again, as in like this particular point, and you said to me, well, Andrea, would you lend Joe money? Or, Eugene, would I lend Eugene money? And Eugene, would you lend Tim money today? Under the current circumstances, under the kind of risks that we have right now, we might go, no, I don't think that's a really good idea. I don't feel so inclined to do it. But the loans already exist because of circumstances that were much better before. So we have a kind of really stressful situation right now where I have lent you money, I borrowed money on much better terms and under much better circumstances, but the weather has gotten much worse. And that's the background. So it's very unstable in that area. Now,
so who do I have to pay back?
Well, you're involved in the economy, and actually the way the economy would work is you might lend money back to Andrea, and you might lend money back to me. You might have investments. So it's the way the world works, and it's the way the bigger world works without the smaller world understanding sometimes, right? Now, in all that is stuff like stock markets, like equities and stuff like that, where people are trying to make money for themselves. Now, you can climb a mountain in any weather, but you can climb mountains in situations where it's relatively safe. If something goes wrong, a rescue can happen. All the different things can happen, right? Right now, what's happening and what you see in the markets is basically this: you have a lot of enthusiastic participants, or mountain climbers, who know that there's some opportunity to make money. There's some kind of stuff that's going on. The price is going up. I'm going to jump in there, but they're doing it in very bad weather. So something were to happen right now, the circumstances around it, the whole thing can collapse a lot easier than before. Now, it's much better, of course, than it used to be in 2007, 2008, because we have got certain things in place. We've learned to be more resilient. We've done a lot of things. But at the same time, we are having one of the most volatile situations that we've ever faced, as in like the markets are going up and pulling down harder, pulling up and pulling down harder. And the nature of that is the levers of control can only move in such a speed or pace that can, we only know the results of it 3 months later. We don't see it in the moment and as you drive it. So imagine driving a car where you steer now and you only know 3 months later that you have steered correctly. I mean, that's really kind of how this is moving. So the problems are moving this fast, but the steering is a nice and slow steer, and we're going to try and go like, okay, this is going to work. So that's where we are right now. It's a risky time to get into the markets. People who are going in right now, taking big bets, are either going to be very, very successful because they took a big bet when it was really, really a bad time to do it, or they're going to be wiped out because the weather is bad, and if something happens, you can't be rescued. So I hope I've given some kind of an indication of what the world economy is doing now, at least what the markets are doing right now, and why interest rates are such a big deal to the rest of the world, because we basically owe each other money, and at some point we're going to have to try and figure out how to call in our debts, and it's not a very comfortable time. So that's my kind of overview. A quick 10 seconds on Facebook. Facebook has gone down almost, I think, 60 to 70% since the start of the year. I think it was when the whole metaverse was launched. And so some people are very gleeful that Zuckerberg is now, in terms of his personal worth as well, has gone down by a similar amount. And most of it's been blamed on the idea of a very expensive bet on the metaverse.
They spent 46 billion trying to buy back their stock last year at 330, something like that, and now it's 100, and it was like, okay, maybe we shouldn't have done that.
Well, the financials of that are hard to, again, complicated, because if they would do it now, everybody thinks, why wouldn't you just do it now, because it'd be much cheaper and all that kind of stuff. But they wouldn't have had the cash as well to do the kind of move they had back then. So that's to be argued. Okay. But the thing that I want to just say about the metaverse is there was a time when someone said Facebook was a bad idea, and there is a time right now where the metaverse is being called a bad idea, and I think it's all about timing. So we'll see. We'll have to see. So don't call it yet. And in the end, like I said, it all comes down to price. People like climbing even in bad weather.
Yeah, I think
that's Musk
good
should
advice.
Also buy Facebook.
Oh God! Oh, please stop.
Then you got
all right,
Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, no, please don't. And he's talking about with Twitter. He's talking about sort of creating it like a WeChat sort of model where you do everything there. And I think one of the reasons Facebook had so many different brands is because the Western consumer doesn't like the concept of being just, in debt to one person, so, but I don't know. So look, we've gone way over time. So I reckon we should get into the theme, but just before we do, I want to give Eugene a chance just to finish on, because what he was talking about mental health in Singapore, I definitely have, it's a global issue. And I think, what you were saying, please stop. I think what we've got to start to recognize, self-awareness is so important right now, right? When you are reacting negatively to people in your community, and that's not sort of the person that you are, and it's maybe even a little bit disturbing that you are doing that, I'd really, really sort of encourage people to say, what is it that I'm really, really unhappy about? And often it's because you're sitting in a place of fear and uncertainty because the world is escalating out of control, and it feels like that right now. And I think so rather than projecting that onto other people and poisoning all of society, we need to really start to look at ourselves and what's going on inside us and addressing it with ourselves first. Because if we don't, we're part of this dystopia that's being formed. So that's all I wanted to add to what you just said, Eugene. But did you want to finish there?
I just want to. I'm not here to judge or anything. I want to remind myself that a lot of times I may be feeling stressed, but I don't have to take it out on people. Right? Yeah. I can find healthy ways to de-stress, like go for a walk with Tim, have a laugh with Joe, and invite Andrea to speak at our platform. Things like that. Will always make me happy. Yeah. Yeah. Am I allowed to share a second piece of news?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just super quick.
Okay, sure. I just bought a new home. That's the news. Yeah. Okay, so Singapore, right? Singapore home prices jump more than expected, and this doesn't seem like news, except that everywhere else the prices have dropped. In every other country. So somehow, by some strange miracle, and this one is to reiterate what Joe said earlier about this strange thing called money. How come in Singapore everyone I meet is struggling, right? Some have lost their job, some have reduced their income as a speaker or coach, but somehow the private home prices are rising. Like who are buying these private homes? Who and where did the money come from? And one of the answer is people who came to Singapore from Hong Kong, from Indonesia, from China, and so on. Yeah, I'm not for or against people coming, because once upon a time I was a Singaporean going to Hong Kong and staying there. Yeah, but I just want to say that it is very artificial, right? Because the prices going up implies that Singaporeans are doing well, but actually most Singaporeans are not doing well. Thankfully, like what Tim said earlier, I am doing well. I'm very grateful for that. And that's why I bought my own private home recently. Yeah, but I feel that it is very unhealthy right now that young couples, a lot of people cannot afford even a normal public housing. In Singapore, HDB is very popular, but even HDBs now are going for 1 million Singapore dollars and above. It's very, very scary. And one last piece of data. Yesterday, the government announced that currently Singaporeans are spending 20% of our monthly income on mortgage, as compared to 17% just a few months ago. So all these statistics are very, very scary, just to reiterate what Joe said earlier.
Yeah. I'll jump in with the 3 very quick other elements, Andrea, and then we'll get stuck into the theme. Very, very super quick. So there was some other news to look at was 4 German companies. They're all 125 years plus were declared insolvent within a 24-hour period. And so they couldn't pay their debts with costs going up. There was a sweet manufacturer. There was a car component supplier from a fabrics perspective, textile components to automotive industry, a German soap company. And so these organizations, over 100 years old, been running and supporting people, that car component company, 6,000 people employed. So it really is affecting people in a lot of places. There's a big story in Australia about the Australian Parliament rape trial being abandoned over juror misconduct. Andrea, if you want to throw in on that one, but if you follow Andrea's weekend reads, she's got links to those particular pieces in that, which is a very serious case in this one. This one is a real big deal. And there's a very light-hearted one. Andrea, did you want to say anything about that or move on?
No, you go. Yeah.
No. I was just going to move on to the Philippines. Yeah. Okay, so I got to say, I love the Philippines one. It's such a cool. So there's a story in the BBC about Philippines students were told to wear headwear that would stop them from, it'd be very obvious that they could not look to the side to cheat from the person next to them's paper. So they all went home and they created these ridiculous. All the photos in the article, you got to check it out. It's really, really funny. Just the level of imagination. One girl's wearing lollipops all around her head, and there has a big Manila card sign, Manila, Philippines, anyway. But saying lollipops for sale for $1. Other people have got toilet rolls attached to their glasses so that they can only see straight ahead. People's headwear. The people are coming in motorcycle helmets. Others have just created, put a paper bag over their head with 2 eyes cut out of them. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Go and have a look. It'll give you a chuckle.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. So we were going to talk about Truss and Sunak and what the crazy stuff that's going on over in the UK. And that's been a really interesting thing for me, not just from the news, and it's also from the social media perspective, because, of course, the Indian diaspora is absolutely elated that one of their own is now a prime minister of another country. And I actually think it could potentially become a bit of a poison chalice for the community, because he's, I think, got the hardest job in the world right now. But the theme today is, are we even remotely ready for extreme weather? So I published a blog called The Humility of 4 Extreme Weather Events in 4 Months, which I experienced with my family across 3 continents. And it's been a very reflective time for me, because when you look at the fury of nature, you know that we have absolutely no ability to control what's coming. Anyway, one thing that's really good is a couple of days after I published my blog, the United Nations have basically said key warming threshold slipping from sight. And basically the conclusion is that there is no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees global warming. And going beyond, we'll see dangerous impacts for all of us everywhere. Well, anyone who's been paying attention know that 1.5 has been out of sight for a very, very long time, but now it's official, right? But this report analyzes the gap between the rhetoric and the reality. And how's this for a figure, right? They find that new efforts to cut carbon would see global emissions fall by less than 1% by 2030, when, according to the scientists, reductions of 45% are needed to keep 1.5 in play. So that's a massive difference. But the other side of one of the authors of the report said, we had our chance to make incremental changes, but that time is over. That time was actually in 1980s, 1990s. And she said, only a root and branch transformation of our economies and societies can save us from accelerating climate disaster. But on the other side in the report is the commentary that's saying governments are failing to prepare for the impacts of higher temperatures. And this is what I was talking about in my blog. So in the UK, there's a committee saying that the government needs to get a grip on the risk of critical infrastructure, the risk to critical infrastructure posed by a warming climate. And the comments are, the thing I find most disturbing is the lack of evidence that anyone in government is focusing on how all the impacts can come together, creating cascading crises. There are simply no ministers with focused responsibility for making sure that our infrastructure is resilient to extreme weather and the other effects of climate change. So having gone through 4 events myself and been watching the media as I do and listening to what's being said by prime ministers and presidents and leaders of countries, I'll just give you an example. So the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, he was in Tasmania after the recent flooding, and someone asked if they will increase the height of the dam wall, which they see is responsible for the flood in that town. And he said something along the lines, we will look into it, the cost will go into the billions, blah, blah, blah. I would like to rewrite his response to that statement, and then I'll hand it over to you guys. This is what Anthony Albanese and other leaders of countries should be saying. We are reviewing the entire nation's infrastructure, from roads to dams, trains to homes, farms, energy, and more. We are going to work out what we need to do to keep Australians safe for the next 50 years and beyond. We are doing this assessment based on the climate scientists who are advising our government, and our whole country must come together to do what we need to do to ensure we do not experience mass suffering in our country. We have many challenges ahead, including relocating communities who can no longer stay where they are. This is going to be a hard time for all of us, but our greatest chance of success is coming together and doing this together. So that's what I think the leaders of countries should be saying, but they are not doing even the smallest amount to get ready. Like just one of the things that I witnessed here in Phuket, they got ready after a couple of years of drought, they got ready to deal with drought by putting in all these pipes and all these new reservoirs, and it's been amazing to watch it. But then they're not ready for the floods, so the drainage needs to be. So, and we need to have both sides factored in, and we're reacting to what's happening rather than planning for what is expected. And, it's been a very humbling process to be a witness to this. So you guys.
Well, I mean, I have my glib answer to things. Really, basically, we need to just call a truce, right? In terms of the world, I mean, and the truce that I'm thinking about is, okay, let's just do one thing and say, okay, yeah, we don't have enough resources to sort all these things out because we're busy with other stuff. The truth should be, let's not be busy with other stuff, right? Let's just stop. Let's stop being busy with other stuff. Let's put the entire military on hold for 3 years and apply military engineers, resources, budgets into trying to shore up the world versus its common enemy, which is ironically itself. But that's the kind of thinking that would make sense. But that's the problem with the world. The world doesn't do things that make sense. People continue smoking. Able-bodied people like myself don't go jogging. We don't do the things that we really need to do, and sometimes we do need a forceful hand, I think, to make that happen. So the thing, and this is about the today coming full circle back to China again, is I think if there's a country that is heading in the right direction at a greater speed than any other country right now, it is actually, and let's not say it too loudly, it's China. They're the ones who have a green plan that is moving forward. They don't have people who are saying, we don't like the green plan, because those people are being kind of like swept aside and saying, well, I'm sorry, this is the big plan right now. This is what we're doing today. China's doing arguably both things at the same time. They're working on the military as well as the green plan, but it does require some forceful action and action that can either be without choice, or you need to do some real galvanization to make everybody make the right choice. And that's the big challenge that we have. So China is leading the way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If we're going to get to a point where it's going to be forced on us, and then God knows what's going to happen, right? But there is a consensus brewing in the world, I feel, especially in the EU, and the EU is making all sorts of big statements. But there is a consensus that is building. It's just not building fast enough. So in regions like Asia, that that we need to do this. We're going to do it. If you don't agree with us, we don't care. We're doing it anyway. That's great because, 2% of the world's population is here. That if that's how it needs to go, because the education isn't there in this region. The conversation isn't there in the same way that it's happening in Europe. In America, I mean, it's still too political, right? But more and more people are waking up. But I think we can build consensus, but we need to do it rapidly now. And it's happening. It is happening. I can feel it happening. I can see it happening, but it needs to happen faster.
I think your idea about how, Phuket, they were investing in drought protection to a degree, and they weren't investing in floods. And if you look at the way that the world reacts to things and communities react to things, and importantly, voters react to things, they vote based on what they can see and what's affecting them now. And they're not necessarily voting on what's going to impact them in the future. Otherwise, Eugene wouldn't have so much trouble trying to get people to buy retirement plans. Because they're focusing on what they need now, not what they need then. And if you look at the fact that they're building that drought protection 2 years into a drought and not knowing that a flood is coming, or planning for the flood is coming, is a really good indicator of that. When you look at what the world does with this whole slow-moving ship of climate action, it's the same thing. They're dealing with what they're seeing now, but the pandemic is proof that they can scramble and react reasonably quickly. Even though in the first few months of the pandemic, we were like, "What are people doing? Come on, do something!" But when it sort of came to a head, it all kind of happened really, really quickly. Although I still say it was like Independence Day, where the world was just saying, let's hope America comes up with a vaccine soon. And eventually they did and profited from it. So, but don't you think that's the thing, that they're looking at what they can see and they're reacting to what they can see, and they're not reacting to what science is saying is coming? But maybe
I think
China
that's,
is.
Yeah.
China's looking at big data.
Yeah, no question, and probably listening to the climate scientists, and they've been hammered this year. They've been hammered for years, but they've been really hammered this year with the 70-day drought, the worst drought ever seen in the world, right? The entire infrastructure has been buckled. The investment, that they need to make to get their country back and able to produce. But if they can produce in a good way, where they focus on getting rid of the Christmas bauble factories and the crap factories that produce single-use plastics, because governments all over the world is banning single-use plastics. So turn them into solar factories and EV factories. And that's what, that's the sort of thinking that they're talking about. But, we've got to think, it's if we need to experience climate change before we act, that, and we are basically, everyone is experiencing climate change now to some extent, right? But there comes a point where we're going to have to experience too much before we act, and then it's too late to act, and that precipice is so close now. Many people, the doomers that I follow, they think we're beyond it. I think we can, but we need to be all in now, and politicians need to be. We all need to be speaking a different language, but politicians need to be speaking a different language, and they need to be speaking to a different audience. They're still talking to the boomer generation. They're still speaking in that language. There's a younger generation coming up who are terrified. There's another article in this weekend reads, eco-anxiety around the world is off the charts. And it's the inaction that creates the eco-anxiety. It's not just facing up to it. It's also understanding what we're not doing. And if you're not protecting the infrastructure, in the UK, 30 years, they haven't updated their water infrastructure, and here we are with floods, right? Roads buckling in the heat. Why train lines buckling in the heat? Why haven't they been upgraded into the right sort of metal to cope with warmer temperatures? We're not even doing the basics, and so we're just constantly getting slammed and then going, all right, we better do something about that. Well, what does this look like in 50 years' time? What do we need to do? Like one of the comments I wrote was about Pakistan. They've got 33 more glacial lakes ready to break. So you'd suggest that the majority of the country is at risk of being flooded from these glacial lakes. So do they rebuild, or do they say, where are these lakes going to break? Because they're going to break, because we're going to get to 2.8. Do they need to migrate the entire country down south where there's land? Do they need to leave Pakistan? Are we even getting close to that point? And that's the sort of stuff that's coming at us, and we're not thinking about it.
So the challenge that
or
we
they
have
don't have
is,
the funds. Go ahead, Joe.
no, the challenge that we have is that we are very, very poor at planning the future. I mean, Eugene's here as someone who meets this kind of challenge every day when his clients don't think about the future. And you can think about it this way: the future is inevitable, whether for yourself or your family. You may not be around for it, but it's certainly coming. And if you think about financial futures as a way to look at things, it is really something that is it's a tsunami that's coming for people. The financial calamities that are coming our way, right? And those are going to be very personal. It's going to be I'm going to feel that a lot more than you think collectively in terms of the imagination. If I'm going to find that the weather outside's gone terrible, it's all gone to shit. We in our minds have this thing that go, okay, but we will survive this. And I think one of the things that is difficult about this is that the truth is probably going to be somewhere along those lines. The more resourceful people are going to make it through the worst times that we have to come out on the other side. And the pity is that there's an opportunity to not have to have that happen. We don't need to go there, but the thing is, the resourceful will make it through to the other side, and hopefully we'll have the lessons of it. It's like the people during, I think, the first two world wars, because you could see things escalating, you could see things they were going to go in a certain way, but they kind of had to go that way before we kind of said, yeah, that was a bad idea. It's really one of those crazy things, but we are fundamentally stupid teenagers as an organism. We have ideas, we want to try stuff out, and we go like, this is okay, they don't know what I'm talking about, it doesn't feel real, I can see this for myself right now. But it really is going to be that. I really think that the biggest thing that I can do right now for my kids is to turn them into the most resilient, most resourceful people that they can be, because that's what's going to get them through this. Because if you look at the number of things that we are supposed to get right, and when Tim was talking about the pandemic, that told me we can't do the climate thing easily. Because if there was something that was clearly something we all had to do together and bring our heads together and had a common enemy and had a common result in mind, it was the pandemic. And we still haven't got it done. As in, like, if you think that it's over, no, it's not. It's not over.
No.
We've just come to the point where you go like, all right, now there's a pandemic around us. We're living with this. So that's kind of the situation.
So effectively, that's the climate change position right there. Then.
Yeah.
Oh well, climate change. We couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
It happens.
And, right.
So we just got to live with it. Masks off, everyone.
I want to ask Eugene for his opinion, because he's new to our conversation around climate, and I agree with what you guys are saying. Eugene, do you want to jump in?
Sure. First of all, I want to confess that I always take plastic bags from supermarkets. Yeah.
Bad boy.
Yeah. And in Singapore, having stayed in Singapore, right, Andrea, for some time, Singapore is very late in the game. Yeah, a lot of people are very concerned about other things. That there's always 101 things more important than climate change, sustainability. And then Tesla came in and went out, right? Elon was so angry, said the government is just talk about electric cars, but actually, in the end, they don't really support it when it comes down to the final screws and bolts. Yeah, so I want to say that I'm part of the problem. Yeah, I was part of the problem. But meeting you, Andrea, that awakened some subconscious part of me that wants to be more green. Yeah, and now I do consciously look at like, what can I do more of that can help the environment? I know I'm probably only doing 0.1%. Yeah, I can do a lot more. Like some friends say, why don't you put a solar panel, right, in your new home and all that? So such conversations rarely heard of last time. Yeah, but now among my friends, more and more so. Yeah, so that's my that small little value add to this conversation.
Yeah, no, I definitely respect that. I think this idea that Singapore is behind. I think you've got a government that is so far ahead in the conversation, and Lee Hsien Loong has been a leading voice in the climate conversation for a very long time, and he gets world leaders sitting at his feet listening to what he's got to say. So your leaders are definitely out there speaking the right words, but I think that they're also protecting the Singaporean community a little bit too much from the reality. And well, don't worry, we'll take care of it for you, right? Which is very much what you felt during the COVID pandemic as well, right? And but it is an all-in. We need 1 billion people changing the way they do, buying less clothes, eating, reducing their meat consumption, if not getting rid of it, going vegan if they can. You don't replace your car with an EV. You just start catching public transport because you've got the infrastructure in Singapore. There's no excuse, right? All that sort of stuff, and I think I'm seeing the rising awareness. I think there's been a lot of great work that's been done. Events like Green is the New Black, Stephanie Dixon, really brought the conversation home. And, there's a lot of people who really, really do care about it. But we almost need Singaporeans to say, we're going to care about it now because you guys can influence the rest of Asia, and change that mindset. I think you can have a big contribution. That's why I encourage my friends in Asia to really speak up about it, because people don't want to listen to a white face. They don't.
I think
not on this.
I think Singapore's been pretty good, though. I'm possibly going to disagree with Eugene a little bit on this one. I thought back in 2019, I think I did I referenced Lee Hsien Loong's National Day Parade. Was a speech. I think it was the rally speech, where he was talking about how Singapore needs to look at climate change and was looking at this big wall that they were going to build underwater and investigating the dikes in the Netherlands and how to do something similar to protect Singapore from rising sea levels, even though some of the infrastructure has built that into play from a flooding perspective and everything else. Then very recently in this past week, they talked about they had said sometime in the latter half of the century they would look at sort of being carbon net neutral. And now they've just come out last week and said, 2050 we'll be carbon, it will be net zero, and then they also reduced some target. So to make it, they increased the target, they reduced the time frame as to when they were going to get stuff done. There's a whole lot of talk and movement at the moment around electrifying the transport system in Singapore, and every bus stop I'm at has got a big billboard somewhere saying take the bus. And I've been, when I walk past newspaper stands, there's on front page stuff every so often, more frequently than any other newspaper stand, country's newspapers that I see, there is talk of climate action that's been taken from a climate perspective. I think Singapore's position is one of exporting authoritative knowledge and how to. I think their position is, if we can lead in this, we can go out there and be involved in the teaching and consulting and sending our leaders to organizations that create a lot of jobs and value and everything else for Singapore as a leader in this particular space. I think that's there, but I think there's also he said it in that particular rally speech that I referenced. He said, we need to get great at this so that we can tell other people what to do with a hand on a heart going, we're doing it.
Yeah.
I think Elon's situation happened, I think, when the first Tesla was bought, there was still a tax on like a petrol tax or something on the car. And that was the problem, because they hadn't quite thought of that. But I think Comfort Delgro which is the big taxi company and transport mover company, got the contract to put in all the electric vehicle units around Singapore. And right next to me are four there for, it's a private company, Blue SG, where we can go and take electric vehicles and zip about. So I think there's been movement towards it. I think there's maybe Eugene, maybe there's an apathy from the consumer to a degree, because we trust the government will do something here. And so we don't, so when they tell us to do it, then we'll do it. And it needs to be a bit more synergistic of, we need to do it, let's do it. When you tell us to do it, we'll do it. And but would you do it faster, please? So
Yes.
plastic bags has been one of the bugbears where it's the double bagging for me that always gets me. It's like, you don't need to double bag. The bag at the bottom of the bag might fall out. I think, okay, well, if you're going to do a bag, do a proper bag, but the double bagging, and plastic bags are the rubbish bags that go down the chute. So there's they're not just thrown away. Well, they are thrown away, but thrown away instead of buying another bag to put all the bags in. You're using the bag that you have to put the trash in and then throw it out. So I don't know. There's that I reckon. Honestly, I still think plastic bags is kacang putih for the big environmental problem, which is small peanuts to the big deal, because the big problem, the biggest area is in the giant industries, and if we can shift the needle there, we got a chance. If we're playing with ear cotton buds and plastic bags, then all we're doing is pushing the problem onto the consumer, who makes a small effort to think we're doing something while everybody else goes on their merry way pumping crap into the environment.
Yeah, but that's one of the arguments that I sort of struggle with, this idea that don't blame the consumer, blame the top 100 polluters. Don't blame the top 100 polluters, blame the top 10 financiers. All of us are part of this solution, every single one of us, right? So, I did a fashion industry climate courage last week, and just the amount of waste in the fashion industry. Australia's just done a banning all single-use plastics, and they're starting in New South Wales, and it's things like bags, plates, cutlery, and ear cleaners, right? But if you really want to do a waste single-use plastic thing, you've got to look at anything in a plastic bottle. Because, when I'm down at the beach picking up all the crap, the vast majority of what's on the beach and looks disgusting. And there was one video that came through of one of the towns in Africa that's being flooded. It's just this sea of plastic bottles just floating through this town, right? So, the waste crisis is such a massive issue. It's so big. It's almost overwhelming. So, but we've got to address that. That's that 3-month sabbatical we all take as a world. Let's clean it up. Let's sort it out. But the 100 industries that pollute this world are creating products that we buy. So if we really want to make a change, we've got to massively reduce our consumption, massively. Every single one of us, and we're not reducing our consumption. We're buying more and more and more, and we're not emotionally connected to anything we buy. So, when you put a dress on, you should feel a connection with the dress. This is the feedback. And I think that's it's called kinetic emotions, right? I think that's we have no emotional connection to the destruction that we create in our everyday lives. I can't accept a plastic bottle. I can't accept a plastic bag. I feel sick when I see people with balloons on social media. I'm like, please stop using balloons, because I can't have a balloon anymore. I can't. And what we need is 1 billion people who feel that way, who feel this connection to Earth and don't want to contribute to the waste that's in the world. And we're not there by a long shot. And that concerns me.
It's a dead air moment.
No, I mean, I think the issue is always about connection, right? Is that what is what I'm doing right now, what I'm feeling, what I'm actually what I'm contributing right now? How does it connect? And the thing that happens for most things is that we are disconnected from the actual final thing by enough steps so that we don't realize we're doing that. I mean, meat consumption, it's a great story, right? But how many of us would consume meat if we actually had to meet the animal that we were going to kill? I mean, it's just one of those things. It can't happen. In war, when they do the statistics and they find out about it, weapons that are issued in war and are fired have seldom met their target, because it's not easy for one human being to aim on another human being and pull the trigger. It's just one of those things that we're not really made to do. And a lot of times what happens is we've got these layers and layers and layers that separate us from the thing that we do and the impact of what we do, so that we don't really feel that at all. So there's no connection. So the sense that you've got about your clothes and everything else, it's something that is, again, because it is far removed. It really is something where you don't think about the total impact. When we're talking about Singapore a while ago, and I realized what really happens in Singapore is that we have a pilot and passenger sort of arrangement. You know, the pilot takes care of a lot of the things that happens to get us there and whatever it is. And the thing, if you think about what a pilot's job is to do, like during an actual emergency, pilots go through a lot of training to make sure that when there's an emergency, people on board don't feel that there is a terrible emergency. They work very hard to make sure that there is calm and there is an ability to do things in an orderly fashion. And that is really the big challenge. We have simultaneously an emergency that should have us scurrying around and being completely panicked, where mental wellness should be at an all-time low because there's such a horrible thing that's happening to us all collectively. And yet at the same time, we have to have the mental wherewithal of calmness that says nothing is going on. We have to be on the Titanic, seeing the iceberg coming, knowing that we can't avoid the iceberg, and we have to plan what we're going to do with the lifeboats. I mean, that's really where we are. And we're having to do that. And there's a bunch of people who know that all that's happening, and they've got a plan. That's really where we are. And the challenge, like, you know, if you think about most emergencies or most situations, right? The death tolls that come out of when there's a bomb or fire, whatever it is usually not from the fire itself. It's the reaction that we have to the fire, and that's where that's the conundrum that we have right now. There isn't enough in terms of a lifeboat plan right now, because if you look at the world, and as you've seen it, you know that, okay, it's coming. Where's everybody gonna go? If we try to contemplate that today, it's an impossibility. We cannot figure that out right now, and it will make us crazy to try and solve it, because it's unsolvable, but it's something that we can deal with. And that's the real challenge. The challenge is that, okay, we've got this huge problem coming. We see it, or a bunch of people see it. And how do you say enough to the people? You know, come on to the tannoy on the tannoy. Who says that on the radio, on a plane, and go like, ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some turbulence. We'd advise you to please put on your seatbelts. And in the meantime, they're losing fuel and heading towards the ground.
Yeah. I can definitely guarantee you that it does drive you a little bit crazy when you try and work it out. Because there's no answer. You know, if I knew the answer, our family would have packed up and moved to that place this year. You know, honestly, that's because I know that it's so much closer than everyone thinks it is. And the other thing is, you don't want to be a passenger in this. You really don't. You want to get ready. Like, you know, the minimum should be planning around gardens. Like, even if you're in a HDB flat, you should have community gardens downstairs, because the global famine that's going to start to build from this year, after all the crop losses this year, farmers aren't going to plant next year because they know we're going to have similar weather patterns because La Nina has been guaranteed, right? So then they've got another year of not planting. And then by the third year, are we going to have any, you know, what's the situation really going to be like? Now, if you've got money and if you're in Singapore, you're probably going to be all right. But for the rest of the world, you know, we've got some big stuff. So paying attention, really important right now. And do what you can. Don't be shocked when it arrives. And don't be shocked that it arrives a lot sooner than you think it's going to arrive. Honestly. But vote for leaders who've got the message. Push your leaders to be saying the right stuff. You know, if they're not talking about protecting the country that you're in for the next 50 years, if they're not talking about putting the infrastructure in place for that, then they're not paying attention. You know, because my whole drive and everything that I'm doing is, even though it's a hard message to be constantly sharing, and it is a hard message to constantly share, I just don't want the people that I love that are in my life across the world, I don't want them to just wake up one day and go, oh shit, you know, because that's what will happen if you don't get prepared. So you don't have to turn into a freak who's living off the grid or anything like that, but maybe that's what the future is going to look like. So, but there's no easy answer to where to go. There's none. Trust me, I'm looking. All right, Shall we finish up with what's keeping you distracted? Who wants to go first?
Okay, well, I will just share that I have come across a TV series that's been on the air for the longest time, but I've only just come to know it. It's called QI. It's from the BBC. It's called Quite Interesting, and it is literally all about facts and stories about the things that we think we know a lot about in the world. And it's just delightful to be surprised by how wrong we are about so many things, including things like how the Black Widow spider really has a very bad reputation it does not deserve. For instance, it's just an incredible journey. And what I love about QI is that it takes a scientific approach to things. And even as a program that does a lot of research to make sure that all its facts are as correct as they can be when they go to air, they acknowledge that in a few years there is a rate of decay of facts, which is a concept which I love. It's like today this is right, but we know that there's a 30% chance that in 3 years it will be wrong. And if you can find it and you have a way to find it, go and look for the series. The series is called QI. It was initially hosted by Stephen Fry, an incredible brain of a man. And now it's hosted by Sandy Totsvig, who is a Dane that has made great inroads in the UK in terms of entertainment. It's a great show if you want to just feel smarter and dumber at the same time. QI, quite interesting.
Nice. I like.
It's also the opposite of IQ. Yes.
All right,
Eugene,
Tim?
what's keeping you occupied? Apart from buying a new house.
that is actually makes me very busy. Yeah.
I bet it does.
Yeah.
Especially solar paneling it now.
No, I'm not committed to it yet. Depends on the CEO in my house, my wife. I find that recently, back to the mental health discussion, right? November, December has been very busy for me. And I'm very grateful to be trusted by the companies, because usually companies want to make profit, blah, blah, blah. But this time they say, can you come and shift the mindset of our people? And I'm pleasantly surprised. People are willing to spend money on this. Not wait until people go burn out, then go and see a counselor. But while they are still new and fresh, just shift their mindset such that they are ready for the any kind of toughness, challenges. And there's a word I've been spreading called anti-fragile, which is basically the opposite of fragile, right? Fragile is easily broken. So anti-fragile is not just not easily broken, but actually becomes stronger due to the stress and challenges. Yeah, and I myself benefited from it, and I thought, okay, yeah, I like to be happily distracted, helping people to be anti-fragile.
Nice.
Me, it's been studies.
Yeah.
It all comes to a head in 2 weeks' time. So I got I got a 8-hour exam on Tuesday and 3 big assignments due in by the 11th. One due on Wednesday and 2 more on the 11th, and then another one a few weeks later. So it's been all consuming.
Heads down. Is it finished then, or is it that just having a break until the next session starts? Or
that's having a break until January.
Yeah, nice.
And that's year 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's semester 2 of year 1. Oh dear, feels that long. Never mind.
All right. So one of the things I've watched is this program, and I don't know if it's new or old or whatever, but it's called American Factory. And it sort of popped up as a recommendation on Netflix. And I thought, oh, this looks interesting. So basically this Chinese company has moved into a Rust Belt town in America and set up this factory. And I think it's in an old GM building. And the whole community has been absolutely decimated by the closure of the original factory. And it's really the sort of concept of bringing a Chinese culture together with an American culture. There's a lot of Chinese speaking where, they've got such fat fingers, they're so slow. And then there's the education sessions on, you know, how you can integrate more into American society and what Americans are like. It's absolutely fascinating. I believe the factory is still going, which is incredible. But the chairman of the factory is this obviously mega wealthy Chinese guy, and his message is this is an important social sort of experiment that we can be successful in America, and Americans can like us. So it's actually also the bigger political sort of ramifications of succeeding. So absolutely fascinating, called American Factory. I recommend it.
I think it was the very first show that the Obamas produced. It was with their new production, the big production company. So when they set out to create all kinds of world-changing content, this was the first show they produced.
Wow. Well, there you go. I didn't even know that. It just sort of came across my screen. I thought, this looks interesting, because of course I've operated within cultures, you know, for at least nearly 30 years, and we are all a bit different. And when you go into the middle of a country, you know, middle Australia, middle China, middle America. I mean, I've had some experiences in Singapore where this father told his sons not to play with my boys because we were Angmos, right? And Angmos are bad. And by the time these guys moved out of the apartment, because they were living there temporarily, by the time they moved out, they loved us, loved our kids, and we kind of changed their world just by interacting with us, right? So I find that sort of side of things, you know, the more we can integrate, the more we can be exposed to each other and our quirky ways, I think the better we're all off.
Yep.
We all benefit from it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thanks for the show.
Yeah, there we go.
Joining us, Eugene. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for putting it all together, Andrea.
No worries. So have a great weekend, everyone. So next Friday, I'm going to be doing another Climate Courage, and we're going to be talking about money. So, Joe, maybe you should come and join us for that one. I've got Dr. David Coe and Richard Busolato back, and Steve and I are going to we're going to be a husband and wife having a conversation. Well, I actually haven't asked them if it's all right yet, but what I want to ask them is, you know, how do you get prepared for the future? You know, will money have value? You know, if you buy a property, you know, there's a potential that you're going to have a stranded asset because it might become unlivable, it might get flooded, it might be burnt down, right? So what can we do? How can we prepare? What should we be thinking about? You know, all those sort of questions. So I think that's going to be a pretty interesting conversation. So I hope people come and check it out. I miss you guys when I do that.
I was going to say one thing you should do right now is again is promote Andrea's weekend reads. I think we don't do enough of it, because on this show we talk about a lot of stuff, but there's so much more that is in there that, you know, I think if you want to form opinions about the world, you have to have the parts with which to make that opinion. And Andrea's reads, definitely weekend reads are a great source. So do you want to just promote that one more time for anyone who's on right now?
Just every Saturday, AndreaTEdwards.com. I put it up there by Saturday night my time, and it's everything I'm reading and watching and listening to, and it's very wide. But I think, you know, when people are overwhelmed by information, the purpose of this is to say, don't be overwhelmed. Just come here. It crosses all media, all topics. You know, you can just sort of get to the essence of what's important, because I'm good at noticing what's important. You know, that's one of my skills, right? Doesn't mean I've got it all, but I try hard. Anyway, thanks everyone. Going off now, but thank you, Eugene. Awesome to have you here, Dylan.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Happy weekend.
Thank you.